Hello, and welcome to my PowerPoint about the Silent Hill 2 remake. I played this game when it first came out and clearly left quite the impression on me, so I'm going to be talking about it here. Okay, so I have gone on quite the journey with horror as a genre. Before last year, so I know I record, I'm doing some of these like several years after the fact, but this one I actually played in October, so all of the stuff that we referred to like last year or previous years is current, so that's good. Okay, so I hadn't seen or interacted with anything that I would call true horror before this year. Or before last year, sorry. But then I went off the deep end into Resident Evil last year and played all of the modern games at least once. And in the case of the 4 remake, I played it 6 times that year. I've since played it 7 times, and I've also played the DLC twice. But I would call 3.5 of the 5 modern Resident Evil games like soft horror. Like the goal of 2, 3, 4, and most of 8, excluding the Beneviento level, is not to scare the shit out of you. Some people may disagree with me about 2. That's kind of the only one that I'll accept criticism on, but I wasn't scared playing that one. All of these games prioritize action over horror, with horror still being an element to them, but not really the primary goal of the game. And I clearly love those games a lot. They mean a lot to me. I have a whole PowerPoint about Resident Evil if you want to hear me talk about it for about 45 minutes. But when I played Resident Evil 7 last year, that was kind of the biggest leap out of my comfort zone. I do not play games in first person because I have gotten motion sick in the past. But I have historically not been very interested in straight up horror as well. Because I loved 2 and 4 so much, I was itching for more Resident Evil, so I went to my local book off. I got RE7 for about 20 bucks, and I decided to give it a go. And I was scared. For the first hour of that game, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I'm getting spooked real bad. And then there was this moment where it just hit me. This is a video game. And then after that, I was good. I wouldn't get spooked when anything surprised me, even every once in a while. But changing my perspective and just realizing that this is like any other game that I've played helps me actually enjoy the game. I could just enjoy the story that the game was trying to tell me. And I did. I really liked Resident Evil 7. It was really eye opening for me that I could separate the horror and just enjoy myself. Then I went on to Resident Evil 8 and fellas. When I came to the Beneviento level, I was scared in a good way. That had never happened to me before in my life. But I absolutely loved how creepy everything in that level was. And then there was that insane baby creature came, and I was thrilled. I was like, I get it. I actually enjoyed something that was creepy because it was creepy. So when I found out that they were remaking Silent Hill 2, I was really excited. This was a game that I had been excited to play. This was my most anticipated game of the year. I was really excited to play this one. Armored with my newfound appreciation for horror games, I was really ready to jump into this one. But I gotta say, this was definitely scarier than I was expecting. Since no one that I know is even remotely interested in this game, I'm going to give a quick plot summary of the events of Silent Hill 2. So, obviously, spoilers for Silent Hill 2. But we play as the main character, James Sunderland, after he receives a letter from his wife, Mary, telling him to meet her at their special place. Which the twist on that is that Mary has been dead for years. She died of some unnamed degenerative disease 3 years ago, causing James to be filled with hope that Mary is still alive. So James enters Silent Hill and finds horrifying creatures that he has to fight his way through. Along the way, James meets 3 other alive normal people, Angela, Eddie, and Laura. They are all working through their own issues and have come to Silent Hill in search of someone just like James. James quickly becomes stalked by the creature called Pyramid Head, pictured here, and then he meets Maria. Maria looks very similar to Mary, but has a more flirtatious personality. They begin to travel together. James explores areas of Silent Hill, but then walks through a door to the other world. This is a mirror version of our world, but everything is decayed, rusted, and grimy. Kind of like Stranger Things, but just kind of a different aesthetic, where in Stranger Things it's all snowy. In Silent Hill, it's all rusted and grimy. There are more creatures here, and Pyramid Head is here. We go through several places within Silent Hill, both in our world and the other world, as the separation between the two starts to disintegrate. When James and Maria go to the hospital in town, Maria starts to feel sick and needs to lay down to rest. James goes through the whole hospital, gets transported to the other world version of the hospital, and is running to escape Pyramid Head when Maria finally finds James. As they both run away, Pyramid Head kills Maria. James is distraught and then quickly traverses to a prison. After the prison, James is in a labyrinth. There he finds Angela, and we learn that she was sexually abused by her father and then killed him. James kills a monster that represents her father. In the labyrinth, we find Maria alive behind prison bars, where she recounts a memory of Mary's. When James completes that section of the labyrinth, he finds Maria has died again. James then exits the labyrinth, where we find out that Eddie has been killing people who are making fun of him. He also killed a dog and maimed a bully. James has to kill him in self-defense after Eddie accuses James of making fun of him. Laura is an 8-year-old little girl who we learn was in the hospital with Mary, and they became close friends. James goes to the hotel that he and Mary used to stay at, where he finds a videotape of Mary telling James how much she loves Silent Hill, which then transitions to James choking Mary. James confesses to Laura that he killed Mary, which leads Laura to run away. In the end, James fights 2 Pyramid Heads, who, after the fight is over, kill themselves. Afterwards, James confronts an alive Maria again, who refuses to let him leave her when he tells her that he needs to accept Mary's death. In the ending that I got, after James defeats Maria, he wakes up in a car and with Mary's body also in the car, drives off a cliff into Toluca Lake with Mary's body in the backseat. So this is really the bare bones. I'm really just giving the bare bones here. I'll obviously go into more about the story later. Okay, so I'm not the first person to say that the story in Silent Hill 2 is very good. But as I have advocated for remakes in my Resident Evil PowerPoint, this remake allows a whole generation of people access to Silent Hill 2. I have known that Silent Hill 2 is a classic for a very long time, but because it was only on the PS2 and also a game from 2001, I would not have enjoyed playing the original quite as much. But as someone who has no frame of reference, I thought the remake did a really great job. While I was playing the game, there was definitely some elements that I could tell were from the original game. If I played this game and wasn't told it was a remake, I could probably figure that out. It's hard to describe to someone who doesn't play video games, but older games have a kind of complexity that you don't really see today, or issues that you would face that are not necessarily ones that you would face today, especially ones to do with traversal and maps. All the shit with how kind of everything is laid out is more kind of something that you see in older games than newer ones. Now, this may be just me, but if we compare exploration and falling apart buildings between the Silent Hill 2 remake and Last of Us 2, it feels different. Now, maybe that is also because Silent Hill 2 has more of an emphasis on puzzles and labyrinths than Last of Us 2, but I found myself getting lost more frequently in Silent Hill 2. There is also more backtracking than there would be in a modern game. Last of Us 2 is a really big, sprawling game that has really honed my gaming instincts to search every nook and cranny to find bullets and health, but there are multiple ways to approach every given solution in Last of Us 2, or every problem in Last of Us 2. There's usually only one door that you need to go through, but there are many different paths that you can take to get to that door. Silent Hill 2 is more linear in that approach, but that linearity most likely was born from technical limitations of the era that it was originally made in. Silent Hill's iconic fog was because of technical limitations, but that's not a negative. I think that there is certainly merit to older games' approach to being more confusing, but I like doing that approach with some modern quality of life improvements as well. Like if you play the Resident Evil 2 remake, you can feel that it's an older game as well. Again, I don't know if this will really make sense if you don't play a lot of video games, but just know that I'm right. Okay, this game has some of the best sound design that I have heard in years. It is really able to keep the player on edge and achieves a lot of scares just through the sound design itself. Yes, the environments, story, and visuals all lead to a very strong sense of unease and dread throughout the game, but the sound design really brings it all home. When you are in the apartment, James' first brush with the outer world, you enter an apartment, not unlike any of the others that you have entered at that point. There's a TV that has static playing, and then you hear this voice that sounds like it's whispering right in your ear. You can't understand what it's saying, but it made the hair on my neck stand up. There are many moments like this throughout the game. James will encounter these moments that are audibly really unnerving. When he's in the hospital, you're going through a bathroom looking for supplies, and then you open one stall that is locked, or you go to open a stall that's locked. which is fine. Turn around, walk out of the bathroom. And then you hear frantic yelling and banging. James takes out his pipe like he would for any other comment encounter, but this isn't a normal scream that you would hear from a creature. But the door won't open and there's nothing there. When James is in the prison, you enter one of the isolation cells. The door closes behind you, and then you hear screaming and scratching at the door. But the door is locked, and James can't leave. You just have to sit there and listen to it for a full minute before the door unlocks and lets you out. I will be providing examples of these moments, but I'm just going to play one here. Spooky. Okay, outside of these moments that really instill fear into you, the game's sound design frequently puts you on edge. James has a radio with him that will go off in loud static noises when there's a creature near, which is good to kind of alert you and put you on put you on a guard. The thing is that James' flashlight is so dim by the end of the game that you can barely see what's in front of him. So you will hear the radio static going off. James takes out his pipe, but you have no idea what is coming or from what direction. It always goes off with plenty of warning too, so you really don't know what's happening. Pile on top of that a lack of healing items and or bullets, and you have created a very stressful situation. There's a time when I was playing this game at around 11:30 at night after being at work all day, and I was running around Silent Hill looking for any kind of healing item or bullet right before I was going to start the prison section. I couldn't find anything, and I couldn't risk looking too hard because James was near death with no ammo. I also hadn't saved in a little bit. I found the Historical Society building. I find the secret door, go down that really long staircase, and then when I reached the bottom of the stairs, an achievement popped up, and I literally jumped. That was my sign that it was time to go to bed, but this game, but that was just really shows how, like, suspenseful and tense I was. But this game will also have random moments where you'll just hear a gasp. Like, just you're walking down a hallway and you hear a gasp. I've seen people say that this represents Mary's final breath, haunting James, which I think is really cool. But this audio choice really puts you on edge. The game really achieves its desired mood so successfully that it made me jump from something that wasn't even in the game. So that's a mark of a scary game. I also need to address the game's visuals because they are really good. This is kind of redundant to say at this point because most modern video games look really good. But the fog in this game is something that brrrr, who's the studio who made this game originally, the original Silent Hill 2 was made by Konami and the remake was made by brrrr. They really needed to nail and they did it. The Silent Hill games are primarily known for their extreme use of fog, and it's interesting that the reason that the original games had so much fog was due to technical limitations at the time. By having the fog, they wouldn't need full images to load all at once, which let them put more detail into what was being loaded. But the fog in this game really needed to accomplish being really eerie and realistic, and it looks fantastic. I love all the visuals. They really contribute to this environment of fear and death. As the game goes on, the differentiation between the real world and the other world seems to get smaller and smaller as the other world keeps bleeding over into the real one more frequently. When the game first starts, it feels like you are in a recently abandoned town. The flower shop James first goes into looks like something like someone hasn't been there in a while to water the plants. All the plants are dead, and then you see your first sign of blood on the ground. Then the switch between the real world and the other world becomes much more, in that instance, it's much more stark. The first time that James saw Pyramid Head, he really scared the shit out of me too. He was just standing there menacingly, and I know people use that joke a lot, but it really applies very good here. Okay, but in the apartments is when we first see the bleed over. The rust, decay, and metalwork becomes more apparent. Then when James makes the leap over, it is a literal gap that he has to cross to get to the other world. All the decay is far stronger than the hints that we have gotten before. As the game goes on, James spends more and more time in the other world, and the player starts to lose their bearings. When James enters the Lakeview Hotel at the end of the game, It's a breath of fresh air for the player after the prison. It's nice here, it's light, and it's not decaying. But this time, James makes no clear step between worlds. As he explores the hotel, you see it starting to decay in real time. Slowly at first, almost hard to notice, but then once you solved one of the final puzzles, or as you get closer and closer to solving the final puzzle, the decay becomes much more apparent. Um, and then when James finds the videotape and we learn the secret that he's been keeping from himself and the player, that is when we see a direct switch flip between worlds. No longer are we in the Lakeview Hotel that has some rest and destruction creeping over. A switch was flipped and now it's destroyed, showing us that there was never an outside world outside of James' control. James is not at the mercy of Silent Hill and its many secrets. James is in control. This is all for him. It's what he needs, how he feels. It represents his emotions and how he is dealing with his grief, guilt, love, and desire. Silent Hill calls to you and draws you in and lets you work through intense feelings of guilt. Silent Hill curates the punishment that you feel you deserve. This game goes into a lot of different themes surrounding death. Grief, death, and guilt are big themes that this game examines. But what I love about the way that it does it is that it doesn't spoon feed you this information. It leaves some details for the players to fill in, but the answers are absolutely right there. This isn't like Elden Ring, where the story is told through riddles, told to you by NPCs and item descriptions. NPCs in Elden Ring be like, the colorless green ideas sleep furiously. Sorry, that was a Noam Chomsky joke. And then Bati Vidya is like, oh, of course. It all ties into the shattering of the ring. And you, the player, are like, I don't get it. Or at least me. That was me. But Silent Hill 2's story isn't one that I would call hard to understand. It definitely tells you what's going on, just in a more subtle way, and some things don't have concrete answers. There are some aspects of the story that I don't even have a concrete answer on. The big one is Maria. Maria looks similar to Mary, but acts more outgoing and flirtatious. To all the Dragon Ball fans out there, it's kind of like Gogeta versus Vegito. Okay. To me, Maria represents what Mary could have been: healthy, extroverted, fun, kind, caring, loving. Some of these traits are ones that Mary had that James loved about her. And I need to state for the record that James did love Mary. I think that maybe Maria is a representation of his most repressed desires for Mary when she was sick. She could be what he wishes his wife was instead of being sick. In his darkest moments, James wishes for a wife who was different from the one that he had, and after her death, he feels guilt for those desires. So Silent Hill gives him that ideal version of his wife to punish him for those desires. When he nears situations that should remind him of the past, Maria becomes more like Mary, showing their connection. When James goes to the hospital, Maria feels tired and needs to lay down, which is something that someone would do if they were sick. And then the other time that we see her is when Pyramid Head is killing her, representing James killing Mary. When James sees her again, she's behind prison bars in the labyrinth. She assures James that she is real and recounts an experience that James and Mary had at the Lakeview Hotel where James made a videotape but then forgot it in their room after they left. After James finishes the labyrinth, he finds Maria dead on a bed and can barely look at her. But he reminds himself that he has a mission to find Mary, and he leaves Maria's body behind. When James sees Maria for the third time, or alive for the third time, she is quickly killed by the two Pyramid Heads, the penultimate bosses of the game. There are 8 different endings for this game, and in the ending that I got, James sees Mary again after killing the Pyramid Heads before she transforms into Maria and finally her, who is the final boss of the game. Maria refuses to have James abandon her and transforms into a creature that is intended to keep him in Silent Hill. Having Maria be the final boss of the game is an interesting choice because it calls into question everything that we have seen previously. I do still think that Maria is the same as Pyramid Head. Both were created by James to punish himself in different ways made possible by Silent Hill. Both were, but Pyramid Head physically punishes him, while Maria mentally punishes him for the desires that he had for Mary being different when she was sick. But I can see the argument that Maria was a kind of parasite that latched onto James's grieving mind in Silent Hill and wanted to use him to her benefit. That her true form is her, and she is yet another monster in Silent Hill. I think that both perspectives on her make sense, and the game doesn't really give a concrete answer as to which one is correct. The other real people within Silent Hill, are a mix of understanding for me. Eddie is an interesting exception to the norm because his time in Silent Hill seems to relieve him of his guilt. When we first see him, he is crying and puking in a bathroom as he is stumbled upon a gruesome dead body. The body is in a refrigerator and is still alive when James gets to the apartment, but dies quickly after. Eddie tells James that he found him like that, but the state of the body was so distressing to him, explaining his violent reaction. You then see Eddie and Laura in the movie theater, and they appear to be friends. Eddie is in the theater watching Static, and he appears to be eating popcorn, though we never see the contents of the bucket, and it looks a little weird. I could be reading too much into that. But the next time James sees Eddie, he is near another dead body. Eddie says that the mysterious man attacked him, leaving Eddie no choice but to kill him. As Eddie keeps talking, he then says that the man was mocking him and left Eddie no choice but to kill him. James is startled by this and reminds Eddie that he initially said that the man attacked him. Eddie seems out of it but agrees with the initial statement. James is suspicious but leaves. The final time we see Eddie, we see the same dead body. Eddie confirms that he keeps killing him because he keeps mocking him. Eddie then tries to kill James. This boss fight was actually really fun for me. It takes place in a meat locker, and Eddie will hide before jumping out to shoot James and quickly retreating. It was high stakes and tense. It was also the most action forward this game ever felt. It was hard trying to spot Eddie before he sees you and shooting him. This was really the only point in the game that actually tests your physical shooting ability. You have to be quick and accurate. Now, one thing about me, I like shooting in a video game. So I like testing my shooting ability in a video game as well. So this is actually quite fun. Once James kills Eddie, he has a look of guilt on his face before he moves on. During this fight, Eddie tells James that he tortures and kills the dog of his bully before killing the bully himself. The game asks the player the question of what a justified crime could possibly look like. During the prison level of this game, the final puzzle is where James reads a poem versions of confessions from prisoners and then has to tug on the noose, coordinating with the confession that he deems justified. I think that this puzzle is the key to understanding the ethos of this game. It is putting the question that the game wants to ask the player on full display. Can we be justified and forgiven for our worst acts? Now, I got really lucky. I didn't understand the point of this puzzle at all and just tugged on one of the nooses and got lucky that it was the correct one. But the actual point is that the correct noose is random. There is no formula for which one is justified, but it does plant the question in the player's mind of which of the crimes portrayed by the real people in Silent Hill are justified. Eddie's crimes are the hardest to justify. People can empathize with wanting to get rid of a bully, but murder is usually a step too far, and especially the torture and murder of the bully's dog. But this game presents crimes all along the spectrum of justifiable to ask the player to find the line within themselves of what they find acceptable. Is Eddie justified for murdering his bully? What part of his actions step over the line? The inclusion of Eddie makes this really interesting because it shows that Silent Hill doesn't just call to people who can be argued to be justified in their crimes. It calls to everyone who feels guilt for something terrible, even if the act itself was terrible. Eddie's actions are the least justifiable in the game, but you can still understand that Eddie felt that he was pushed at first and then kept going. Eddie's death was not something that James felt guilty for outside of the small moment when he looked at Eddie's corpse and felt sad in a way. But that death will not haunt James like Mary's does. The character on the other side of the spectrum of Eddie is Angela. When you first meet Angela, you see her at a graveyard outside of Silent Hill looking at a grave. She tells James that there is something wrong with the town of Silent Hill, but that she's going to venture in to look for her mother. Outside of Maria, Angela is probably the character who James has the closest relationship with. The next time we see Angela, she's in her room looking at a big mirror with a knife in her hand. She appears to be incredibly depressed, and James convinces her to give him the knife. Now, when this first happened, I was excited because I thought that I could then use the knife as a melee weapon. Much to my dismay, it was in my important items inventory, and I couldn't take it out, which made me sad. But anyway, we see Angela throughout the game having various versions of PTSD flashbacks to some event that we don't know. At points, she's confused about where she is and doesn't recognize James. When we see her, she will usually remember where she is and remember that eventually remember that she needs to find her mama. When James first enters the labyrinth, we are in what appears to be an apartment or a home. We see a closet. When James opens it, it shows a teddy bear and a blanket on the floor. There are TVs throughout this labyrinth of an apartment that are saying half identifiable, degrading things about Angela. This is when we fight the abstract daddy, which is by far the most disturbing part of this game for me. I was so in love with this game that I was getting up early before I had to go to work so that I could play it, which means that I fought the abstract daddy at 9:30 in the morning before I had breakfast, which was probably not the best time of day to do this, but I don't know if there is a good time of day to do this. It genuinely messed me up for the rest of the day, and I see that as a positive though. Seeing the abstract daddy is one of the most disturbing depictions of rape in a monster that I have ever seen, and it was a lot. Luckily, I only had to fight it once. After the fight, Angela says that she thought that James was interested in having sex with her and that he could just force her like he did. Through this, James realizes that Angela's father has been sexually abusing her since she was a child, and the player can connect the dots that Angela killed her father, which is why she's in Silent Hill. Despite Angela's actions being extremely justifiable, she is still in Silent Hill, an evil, dark place that calls to the guilty. Angela's story being what it is shows that Silent Hill itself doesn't discriminate between good crimes or bad crimes, but it pulls people in who have done something that they themselves deem terrible. Angela would not be socially or legally punished for her crime, but she still feels guilty for it and can't seem to escape. The catharsis that she gets at is after James has killed the abstract daddy. Angela goes up to it and throws stuff at it, punches it, and kicks it, all yelling how much she hates him. This appears to be the moment that she acknowledges her situation for what it was. At the end of the game, we see Angela ascending a staircase on fire. James is confused by the flames before Angela says that this is what she sees all the time. I think this means that the fog that James sees in Silent Hill is personal to him. Angela sees fire. I've seen theories that Eddie sees ice because we see the air that he breathes in the bathroom when we first meet him, and his final fight is in a freezer. Everyone's idea of punishment is different, proving that Silent Hill may or may not be real. But Angela tells James that she's grateful that he saved her, and she's not sure if he should have. She goes on to point out how much work is left for her to be able to recover, how much pain and suffering are ahead on her path. She says that if James couldn't save her from that, then why would he bother saving her from the abstract daddy? James doesn't have an answer, but she keeps walking up the stairs. Angela's story really stayed with me for a while after I played this game. I thought it was really well done and gave a really emotional portrayal of a victim of sexual abuse. The one character whose inclusion in Silent Hill that makes the least immediate sense to me is Laura. Laura is 8 years old and was friends with Mary in the hospital that they were both at. Throughout the game, James keeps trying to have a conversation with Laura, and she keeps running away or leading him to traps. We eventually find out that she was very close with Mary. Mary saw her as a surrogate daughter. She had heard about James not being the kindest to Mary from Mary and was afraid of him. The worst thing that we see Laura do is that she leads James to a room in the hospital and locks him in with a boss called Flesh Lips, which, it's scary. But you get the impression that Laura doesn't see any of these monsters and doesn't really know what she's doing. She is never in any danger. We never see her even perceive any of the monsters that James does in Silent Hill. I think that she is in Silent Hill because she feels guilty for not helping Mary more. She doesn't know that Mary is dead, though I'm sure she suspects. She is in Silent Hill also searching for Mary. I think Silent Hill is the most calm for her because she's so young. She doesn't have a developed sense of right and wrong yet. She doesn't understand or have the same nuances towards grief or guilt that the adults do. I think Silent Hill is less scary for her because it matches her developmental age. She isn't fully developed yet, therefore Silent Hill isn't either, especially since most of her actions are in search of Mary. I saved the main character for last, good old James Sunderland. James is in Silent Hill because he murdered his wife Mary. At the start of the game, he has a lapse in memory. He thinks that Mary has been dead for 3 years, and the letter she sent him was confusing, but brought him hope that she was still alive. Throughout everything, despite any other circumstances, James did love his wife. Mary loved him. We have spent all this time with James. We want to see what happened to Mary as much as he does. Is she alive? What happened? Why did she send him that letter in the beginning of the game asking him to come to Silent Hill? When James has a conversation with Laura in the hospital, she tells him that she has a letter from Mary, which she uses to trap him in that room with Flesh Lips. James then thinks she is lying about that letter existing, but then at the hotel, Laura says that the letter was real, giving it to him. Giving it to him so that he can read it. Laura then says that she has another letter to James, which she has lost. At the very end of the game, when James has driven off into the lake, or at least in the ending I got, the player gets to hear the letter that Mary wrote. The letter is long. It gives us our first real insight into Mary's state of mind. She tells James that she is sorry for how she took her anger about her disease out on him. She says that despite the pain that she was in, that she didn't like the hospital and she's afraid of dying. But despite it all, James made her happy. I'm not sure if we get to hear Mary's letter in other endings, but I'm really glad that I got to hear it in the one that I got. It's one of those endings where I just had to sit and stare at the TV for a bit before I could move on with my day. James needed Silent Hill because he loved his wife. He killed her to free both of them from the torture of the disease that was slowly killing Mary. Both of them knew that she wasn't going to recover, but the game leaves the decision up to the player if that decision was justified. Can we empathize with James in this position? Does Maria's existence throw a wrench into that? It is asking some really tough decisions, or really tough questions of the player to really think about James's actions. In the ending that I got, James couldn't forgive himself for his actions leading to his suicide. For me, James's decision is one that I can empathize with, even if it's horrible and wrong. James's murder made him feel so guilty that it drew him to Silent Hill so that he could punish himself for what he did. He felt like he needed to be punished, which is what led to the creation of Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head is James's own creation so that it can curate and create punishments for himself. We see Pyramid Head kill Maria twice. Throughout this game, you are given tiny hints as what is going on. That doesn't make sense without all the context, but looking back on them, you can see how the truth is slipping through into the world that was created that this world was created for and by James. I really love that attention to detail, which is really cool. I was really invested in that mystery, and I was playing this game at literally every free moment that I had, so I could try to figure out more about what was going on. I really like James as a character. I think that he's a lot of depth within him, and I really enjoyed getting to figure out what was going on with him. One of the more interesting details from this game that I don't hear many people talking about are the stories that you find throughout the notes. I never used to care about what was written on notes that you would find throughout the world in video games. Then, on one of my many playthroughs of Uncharted 4, I decided to really pay attention to the notes. The notes are way more important to that game than they are really any other or games by Naughty Dog. They really give you a lot of information about Henry Avery specifically and the other pirates under his command. I found that I really enjoyed getting that extra bit of information, so I started reading the notes in the games where the story interested me. Silent Hill 2 Remake has very subtle stories that are told throughout notes that are never quite as explicit as Naughty Dog, so, Uncharted 4 or Last of Us. In the hospital, you find notes and the occasional voice recording from the staff, patients, and doctors, documenting the treatment that some of the patients would face. They were being abused really horribly by the staff there, and we get to see pieces of the fragmented minds of the patients. This is contrasted with the hospital director's notes, where we show his obsession with curing 3 sick patients with diseases that he cannot understand or diagnose. One of the main puzzles in this section is finding the wristbands for all 3 of these patients and putting it on a mannequin hand that is in the hospital director's office. It really adds another layer of dread to this already scary environment to have the obsession of the director contrasted with the treatment of some of the patients. You see how some patients were in filthy conditions and locked away, all while the director gets lost in his desire to cure these 3 patients, who themselves were mistreated. In the final note you find from him, the hospital director, you see that he can't cure him, but they aren't sick anymore. He wonders if there was any lesson to be learned through the process of this. And I really liked this extra bit of flavor that it added to the world, because you don't even really know how much of this is real, or how much of this is conjured from James or any other visitor from Silent Hill if it's been left behind. Telling the story in the place where James and Mary spent so much of their final years together shows that other people were suffering as well, and people within needing their own Silent Hills. The other story that is told is in the prison. You see notes from guards about how one prisoner has become obsessed with another, always taunting him. They noted that they have to be separated. Then you find documentation of the instigator prisoner breaking out of his cell and barricading himself and the other prisoner in the bathroom to resolve their tension. You find notes from the first prisoner taunting the other, telling him where to find him, that they need to finish this. You follow the path that the one prisoner made for the other to get to the bathroom, dug through walls and back rooms to get there. The barricade outside of the bathroom still there. You never learned what the fight was about or the true relationship between these prisoners. But finding these notes made the prison feel much more real to me, more lived in. This makes it feel like a real place, not just something that is a reflection of James' cognition. In the bathroom, you fight many monsters. A working theory that I have is that the monsters are drawn to places of past anguish. that they can feel the footprints of pain left behind by others who either lived in Silent Hill or passed through it. That the pain that others felt draw them in. They are all creatures that were made. We see Pyramid Head making and attempting to control a mannequin, so we know that they're not organic. You can also tell this from their designs. They have stitches or other elements of experimentation all over them. So even though the monsters do not feel human emotions anymore, they are all stripped back to their instincts, closer to akin to animals than humans. So their instincts could drive them towards pain, one of the few emotions they may yet remember. In the other world, you typically see more monsters, which I think is an extension of that desire for pain or fear. Since the other world is ours, but stripped back and eroded, you could also have more remnants of those emotions that the monsters search for. Or maybe this is a video game that needs enemies in a way that is engaging for the player with varying levels of difficulty to keep it interesting, and I'm thinking too much about it. It's probably that, but I also think that they clearly put a lot of thought and effort into all of the details into Silent Hill, so maybe I'm not crazy. Okay, the other big example of written text is graffiti all throughout Silent Hill. This gives an insight into the town and some of the notes that are written explicitly for James. These instances of a graffiti really give the player a sense of dread over everything in Silent Hill. Some of the graffiti that is specifically for James seem to be a reflection of his own thoughts. One that says, quote, "If you really want to see Mary, you should just die, but you might be heading to a different place than Mary, James," end quote. I also really like that the notes that you find within the apartments, hospital, and prison are elements that can be missed. But these notes, the graffiti that are written in red on buildings, are impossible to miss. And they seem to reflect how James feels about himself in a way, which is why they are so much more prominent. Silent Hill 2 Remake is clearly a game that I enjoyed a lot, that gave me a lot to think about. It says so much about the darker parts of the human experience that I found just really intriguing. I really hope that they will do more remakes from the Silent Hill series. I'm kind of hoping that Silent Hill 3 is the next remake, but that's only because two people I love on Twitter, Vero and Hazel, say that it's one of my favorite games of all time. So, but I will obviously play whatever gets done in the Silent Hill franchise from this point forward. I really loved Silent Hill 2. Okay, also, but real quick, like, I know I've been talking a lot about Last of Us 2 in this, but look at the shot comparison. Like, these are like composed the same, and I feel like the lighting is really similar. You know, obviously Ellie is more blue, but like the face expressions seem similar. I don't know. Just need to point this out that I was reminded of this here. Okay. So, thank you so much for listening, and